Massive Monday night matchup between the Los Angeles Chargers and Arizona Cardinals. Two teams seemingly going in different directions will either reverse course. Let's discuss. It's Crossover Thursday.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thursday, week 7, before any introductions. This is the time of year where I like to tell people, appreciate football. We're 6 weeks in, and it went like Christmas morning. It's only going to get worse, okay? We're only going to be seeing the finish line more and more clearly. Appreciate it. Alex Clancy locked on Cardinals. David Drogemeyer locked on Chargers. Monday night football with two teams that have new regimes, two teams that have some positivity, two teams that have some shortcomings, and we're going to discuss it all here on a Crossover Thursday. Today's episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. This is how this show is going to go for those that haven't seen a Crossover Thursday yet this season. We're going to talk Chargers in the first segment. Ups, downs, Harbaugh, humdingers, whatever it is in between. Second segment, all things Cardinals, what they need to improve upon, what are the bright spots have been, etc. And then the path to victory for both teams. We round it out here. David Drogemeyer, one of my boys. We get to do this a little bit more often now, which is awesome. Talk to me about the Chargers. Listen, for Cardinals fans, what's it like, Brandon Staley, Jim Harbaugh?
It's such a completely cataclysmic difference between the two. I think that it's the difference between someone knowing completely who they are and what they want and being able to go out there and do it because they have a track record of doing it before. And that's Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh has an identity. He has a track record of success. He is a culture changer. You know what his brand of football is. It's very well established. And I think for Brandon Staley, as a first-time head coach, he was trying to find that identity. He was trying to find, well, hey, am I going to be the crazy go for it on fourth down guy? Am I going to be able, to be the mad scientist and create great defensive game plans? And that it just never happened. It never materialized into any kind of discernible identity. And Jim Harbaugh comes in, gets hired, says, we're going to play physical smash mouth football from the jump. I'm going to bring in the type of players that I need. We're going to establish the line of scrimmage, and we're going to play really, really good lockdown defense. And that's what Jim Harbaugh has done. And that's what the Chargers have been so far through, 5 games. And I think when you're looking at the biggest storylines for the Chargers, especially offensively, is can they put a complete game plan together offensively? I just think they've had stretches where they've been great. I think last week they were able to at least give you a full half of football, which was better than the first quarter that they gave against the Chiefs. But it's all about being able to score in the fourth quarter. I think that's so paramount important for both of these football teams, but especially for the Chargers. You can't go cold against a team that can score points in a hurry.
Yeah, and, the running game is going to benefit Justin Herbert. I'm curious about Justin Herbert, his adapting to a more stable situation where it's not like, okay, Justin, go win the game and don't get hurt. Otherwise, things are going to go sideways. What's it been like for his maturity? Because for him, he shot out of a cannon like nobody, come on, nobody expected with Oregon. They had the reins on him at Oregon, and he was let loose in the NFL, and then he was one of the most fun things we've seen on a football field in a long time. And then he's kind of regressed a little bit, numbers-wise. How has he adapted to this run first, smash mouth, throw the ball second kind of offense?
I think it's probably an adjustment for Justin because, he's had to be Superman pretty much since the beginning. He's had to throw the ball, 100 times because the Chargers have had no semblance of a running game. They haven't had that ability to run the ball when the opponent knows you're going to run the ball to be able to close out a football game. They just never have really had that. And so now they have that running game. They have that ability to establish the line of scrimmage and dominate and kind of get those explosives in the running game, which they haven't really had outside of some Austin Eckler receptions. That's been there, but it's completely different now. They really, really want to establish that, they can win by running the ball and taking more off of Justin Herbert's plate, not asking him to be Superman, but being able to know that if they need to put him in that mode, he can go out there and do it. But he can be Clark Kent and hand the ball off to J.K. Dobbins and still win football games with a really, really good defense. And that they absolutely have a very, very, very good defense. So I think it's an adjustment period because Justin loves to throw the ball, but he also loves to win. Yeah. And the Jim Harbaugh style of football might not be the most exciting brand of football in the world offensively, but they win a lot of games. And you know what Justin Herbert wants to do? He wants to win. So he's completely fine with it.
Yeah, that's the interesting part because you look at what the moves they made. I mean, Mike Williams gone, Keenan Allen, fan favorite forever. I mean, I lived in San Diego for a long time, and it's like Keenan Allen was up there with the loves of, LT and Antonio. Yeah. It's not at the, the Hall of Fame, like tippy top 1% level of his craft. But I mean, the dude was an absolute mainstay there, and he's just been consistent with Phillip Rivers and then otherwise, Justin Herbert. J.K. Dobbins, removal of talent from the wide receiver room, Gus Edwards, both over from Baltimore, run first. Like, they made it known immediately that this was not going to be your uncle's Chargers. Like, run the ball, play defense. They brought Khalil Mack back and Joey Bosa. I'm not sure contractually what happened, but they're both still on the team.
Yeah, they both took pay cuts, Alex. They both took straight pay cuts. Both of them, Joey and Khalil, took pay cuts to stay and play for the Chargers and play for Jim Harbaugh.
It's crazy. So mid-game, you're running the ball. You're playing good defense. How have the adjustments in game been made? Unlike Brandon Staley, who's like, we're going for it every fourth down. I don't care. I'm not going to change. I was with Sean McVay. Listen to me, kind of thing. It's like, how has that shifted? Adjustment-wise mid-game.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have a defensive coordinator in Jesse Minter that is able to identify these matchups and be able to make adjustments in game a lot quicker. And you see those adjustments and you see tangible differences in those versus when Brandon Staley would identify things too late and really get kind of taken advantage of and exposed. His defensive philosophy was so beautiful as far as in principle, right? It looked beautiful on paper. You had answers to all the questions, but they were too difficult. It was way too difficult for the players to go out there and execute. They were thinking too much and not being able to play fast. And see, the thing is, for Jesse Minter, his defense is really easy for the players that are executing the plays, but very difficult for the opponents to be able to discern what they're trying to do and how they're trying to attack them, because there's a lot of disguise, a lot of simulated pressures, a lot of trying to make the quarterback figure out what the sight picture is going to be and then changing it after the snap. So I think it's all about the differences in the philosophy and how they execute their defensive game plans that has really made such a huge difference both in game and from week to week.
David Drogemeyer, one of the two, he and Daniel Wade do a great job over with Locked On Chargers. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. They're a big boy football team now. They're an adult, is what I say is they're an adult football team now. And that's not a slight on years past, but it's just the overwhelming presence that Jim Harbaugh has and the respect that he has earned through trial and tribulation, through the NFL and college, and they're a big boy football team now. The Cardinals have a similar version of that, removing Cliff Kingsbury, who is Brandon Staley on offense, and implementing Jonathan Gannon with a different pedigree, not to the level of Jim Harbaugh, but the Cardinals are trying to get through the mud and the muck and find who they really are. What are we going to be seeing from them on Monday night as they host the Chargers? We'll talk about that next on a Crossover Thursday. This episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you by our friends at Arena Club. For most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on a Luka rookie card just isn't in the cards. And I love collecting, but there's some serious money to drop if you get deep in it. And thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, now it's possible to score gem mints for a fraction of their retail price. Every card that I listed was hit from last week's Arena Club slab pack drop. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and clear hits the clear hit rates for each one, if I can talk. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency, and after your pulls are revealed, they will immediately be placed in your showroom for safekeeping, selling, trading, or auction. Right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card by going to arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL. That's arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL, code LockedOnNFL for 10% off your first purchase. Today's episode of Crossover Thursday is also brought to you by the Game Time app. Game Time is, if you have to choose between kids, parents do that. Game Time is one of my favorites. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that. They've got a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. So another way to do it is their all-in pricing option. You toggle through this. You have to toggle it. All-in pricing. It shows you, row, section, seat, whatever it may be, to a Suns game or whatever you want to go to, and it'll show you the total amount. So it's not like, well, what are the fees, taxes, everything. Gives you the final sticker price that adds clarity in your ticket search. Also, seat views. You can get a panoramic seat view from your seat in the app before you buy, so there's no guesswork when you buy the tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right. Crossover Thursday. David Drogemeyer at Dro Talk SD on Twitter. At Clancy's Corner for me. Finally got my Twitter back after 6 months of purgatory. It's just fantastic and terrible at the same time. Fantastic and terrible. It's a little of both. So we talk Chargers. Something that's fantastic and terrible so far this year is the Arizona Cardinals. We've seen peaks that we didn't necessarily think we'd see. We've seen valleys that were expected, but still there's some sort of surprise nature to them, which I don't really understand. David, firing squad, hit me.
Yeah,
so
about
the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's a lot that's been made about Kyler Murray and kind of his path and all of the off-field distractions with the contracts and the studying and all of that. But it seems like this offseason he really wanted to lock in and he wanted to be a little bit more focused. And hey, they for all of the people out there that said that he doesn't have any weapons and they haven't gotten him any weapons, they finally bring in Marvin Harrison Jr. in the draft. And, it seems like, according to the stats, he definitely has been as advertised. However, I think a big burning question that everybody wants to know is, what's the status of Marvin Harrison Jr. with the concussion? Is he on track to play? Has he cleared protocol? What's that look like as far as that and the outlook for the offense for the Cardinals?
Yeah, he's still in concussion protocol as we're recording this. With that extra 24 hours, that may open a window for him playing. But as we know now, he's still in concussion protocol. Regarding the offense in him, this is the main takeaway that I lend to people who aren't as close with the Cardinals as I am. Marvin Harrison Jr. was drafted into a very good situation in the sense that he was not drafted to save the offense. He came in to the NFL as a rookie as probably the third option behind James Conner and Trey McBride. For fantasy football lovers out there, Trey McBride is well on his way emerging into that, upper echelon tight end one room. Sam Laporta took a step back this year. Mark Andrews is still on a milk carton. Like, Trey McBride is really emerging as that guy. So even if the Cardinals didn't draft Marvin Harrison Jr., it would have been James Conner and Trey McBride. And now that you brought him in, now it's going to take some time. It's not like you can just roll in and be a dude in an offense that's primarily run first and run play action. It's tough for Drew Petzing, the offensive coordinator, where it's like you drop this elite talent into a kind of mundane offense that worked last year without any sort of real talent until Kyler Murray came back. It's going to take some time. It's kind of oil and watery until you figure out exactly where the target should go and getting Marvin Harrison Jr. in space. But as of now, he's in concussion protocol, and we'll see what happens for Monday night.
And then I guess as far as like the offensive output and that identity and what they're trying to do, what's that hit rate been like, that success rate? What's the offensive line been like? How have they been blocking? What's the pass protection outlook and versus the run blocking? Kind of what's your assessment of that unit?
Yeah, the tough part is Will Hernandez, right guard, who has been all world since he signed a couple years ago, is out for the year. Jonah Williams, who the Cardinals signed to a 2-year pretty team-friendly deal. Wanted to come play with Kyler at right tackle. He's been out pretty much since like the second snap of the NFL, of the season. So they have Kelvin Beachum on the right side, who's a wily vet, and they're trying to piecemeal the interior of the offensive line on the right side together. And I think a lot of it's going to be running to the left. I mean, Paris Johnson Jr. has been as advertised when the Cardinals traded back and then traded back up to get the kid from Ohio State. And he's been the left tackle that they drafted, and he's been very good. Yalta Furholt is the unsung hero at center, has really kind of he's filled some holes where the Cardinals have needed it with inferior talent before this season, and now with Will Hernandez out, he's doing much of the same. I now have to implement the old adage that I used to use when the Cardinals offensive line wasn't great, was the best offensive lineman the Arizona Cardinals have is Kyler Murray's legs. And that's still kind of the case. It's going to have to be a little bit more jazz as opposed to the waltz behind the line of scrimmage for Kyler. He's going to have to be out of the pocket more. He's going to have to just make plays happen and extend plays, especially with the likes of, Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack on the other side. Like, it's the offensive line is played better than expected. And with the run blocking specifically, that is almost more important than pass blocking, because if they can't run the ball, they're in trouble. And that's something that, Drew Petzing's offense predicated upon the run. And when the Cardinals run the ball well, they're in games. When they don't, they're not. So that's kind of where we're at with that.
And then I guess, switching things over to the defensive side.
Do we have to?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. We got to get there. We got to educate the Charger fans on what they are going to expect when they see this Arizona Cardinals defense on Monday night. Looking at the numbers, the one thing we know is that the Arizona Cardinals love to give up rushing yards. They have given up a metric ton of rushing yards so far, and they haven't really gotten after the quarterback too much. They only have 11 sacks so far on the season, according to ESPN. So what's the defense been like? Who are the stars? What's the issues that they have to get corrected on that side to get some better quality football going forward?
Yeah, I think that they had 6 or 7 sacks through 3 weeks. So it's like the last couple of weeks have been tough. This is not the year for the Cardinals to be competitive defensively. This is You draft some young players, you let them, you have them grow at the NFL game. Pass rush is non-existent. And when I say non-existent, I mean it doesn't exist. Oh. They don't have like Bija Ojolari, their second-round pick 2 years ago at LSU. Stud got hurt in camp, out for the year, ACL. Darius Robinson, their 27th overall pick, guy who can play inside and outside of the defensive line out of Missouri, hasn't played yet. We'll see. I mean, the practice window's been open after he went on IR. We'll see if he does play. It's still up in the air at this point. The big thing to take away about the Cardinals defense this year is Budda Baker's still really good at football. Jalen Thompson has played okay, but not to the level that we've seen him at the strong safety position. With that, it's about the young corners. It's Garrett Williams out of Syracuse, who was a third-round pick 2 years ago, but was only there because he tore his ACL around Christmas time. He would have been a fringe first-round pick if that didn't happen. So the Cardinals got lucky there. He's their CB1. He's really emerging as that guy. Max Melton, second-round pick out of Rutgers this year. The Cardinals traded back, passed on Kamari Lassiter, Kool-Aid McKinstry, and Cooper DeJean, all of whom were drafted before Max Melton. The Cardinals traded back. If they wanted one of those guys, they would have taken them. They saw Max Melton out of Rutgers as their guy, and he's really starting to become what they thought he could. And
I liked Max in the draft. I really liked his game. Yeah,
and because he hits really hard. The only real downside to his game is he watches the quarterback's eyes too much, and that's learned at the NFL level like that with a good coach. So He's really becoming that guy. And then Dadrion Taylor Demerson Rabbit out of Texas Tech, 4th-round pick. He's going to be the heir apparent to either Jalen Thompson, which is traditional position strong safety, or if they move up from Budda Baker, he may move over to that. But all those guys, that triumvirate of guys have played much better than how long they've been in the NFL. And that is a very nice breath of fresh air for a defense that's been devoid of talent for 2 seasons now.
Well, I mean, I think we know what the Chargers are going to want to do in this football game. This is Greg Roman. This is Jim Harbaugh. And they're looking at a run defense that is ready and ripe for the picking. So I would not be surprised if they try to run it 45 times in this game and really, really try to establish that line of scrimmage. But we'll see. We'll talk about those keys to victory here real soon.
This episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. So FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Okay. They're going to give you a big bleep in return when you bet just $5 on your first $5 bet. I'll talk about that in a second. And in the information age, the most information possible while you're wagering is what you want. So when you get in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. You don't have to have 38 Google tabs open, man. You don't have to be doing any sort of research like that. FanDuel's got you covered at your fingertips in the location on the app where you're placing your bet. On top of that, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You want to bet on the game Monday night. You want to bet on who's going to win the MVP. FanDuel's got you covered for all of it. That's FanDuel.com. Paths to victory time here on Crossover Thursday. David Drogemeyer, one of the great duo over there, Locked On Chargers. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. For the Cardinals, this is a we don't know what the hell they are yet still scenario. Okay, off the heels of the comeback victory against the 49ers 2 weeks ago, they get absolutely embarrassed against the Packers. I'm going to go first because there's less margin for error for the Cardinals when it comes to paths to victory. Okay, number one, and this isn't fair, but it's necessary at this point. Kyler Murray needs to be special. Kyler Murray has been one of the more polarizing characters over the season because we've seen the oh my God moments that I call them. We've seen them. We were reminded what he can do. And then we see a lot of mundane, less than average football being played in key moments. And we just don't know which one's going to eat the other. So right now, Kyler Murray being special, and I'll add an addendum to it, is they need to run with him a little bit more. And that's the biggest thing for me, is keeping opposing defenses on their heels. And that's something that will immediately crack a game plan if they can't stop Kyler Murray. And he only has to run the ball 2 or 3 times. It doesn't have to be 10, 12 times. That's the biggest path to victory for me, for the Cardinals, is Kyler Murray needs to be special, especially with the state of the defense right now. What's the biggest path to victory for you with the Los Angeles Chargers?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one for me is contain Kyler Murray. I mean, it has to be. And I know it's like, well, hey, you want to get Kyler Murray running the ball? And, well, yeah, of course you do, because the guy's electric with the ball in his hands. Like, he's one of the fastest athletes on the football field anytime that he is on that football field. And he's got some shake and bake, and he can really make some things happen. And unfortunately for the Chargers, like, that game was 23-16 against the Broncos, but if you watched it, it was not anywhere close to that score. The Chargers dominated that game for the better part of 3 quarters. And the Denver Broncos did not score a single point until 10 minutes left in the football game. And that kind of coincided with Christian Fulton going out with injury, and also with Bo Nix running the ball a lot more and scrambling. And he had 6 scrambles for 61 yards in that game. And, well, guess what? Kyler Murray is way better at scrambling than Bo Nix is. He's a lot faster. He's a lot more electric and athletic, and the Chargers have to contain him. You have to make sure you are disciplined in your rush lanes, and you have to make sure and keep him in the pocket as much as possible. When he gets out on the numbers, he can make big plays in a flash, 20, 30, 40, 50 yards down the field, and you're chasing him, trying to figure out how to get him on the ground. And by that time, it's already over. So containing Kyler Murray, especially on the ground with the legs, keeping him in the pocket, staying disciplined in your rush lanes, is going to be uber important against a Lamar Jackson type of athlete with the legs.
Number 2 for me, conventional wisdom would lend one to think it's contain the duo pass rushers with some sort of chipping, 12, 13 personnel, whatever it is. For me, it's 10 plus targets for Trey McBride. With Marvin Harrison Jr. playing, with Marvin Harrison Jr. not playing, Trey McBride needs to be the number 1 target for Kyler Murray. Trey McBride is special. We saw it last week, 8 for 96, and it wasn't in garbage time. They weren't down 40, and he had 70 yards receiving in a game at a point in the game that didn't matter. Trey McBride is special, okay? He no longer has to be that blocking tight end at times. When they drafted Tip Raymond, they have Isaiah Higgins. They've got guys who can do that for him in 12 or 13 personnel, where he can actually be a pass-catching tight end like a Jimmy Graham, as opposed to needing to be a George Kittle. And that's something to unlock this offense irrespective of who is healthy and who isn't. If Trey McBride's healthy and Kyler Murray's healthy, that needs to be the one option out of the 1 and 1A option in the passing attack, because he can get in space, he can run over linebackers, he can run over safeties, he can run over corners, and he's got great hands and he has a nose for the end zone. So that's number 2 for me.
Yeah, I mean, he's a dangerous weapon, and he is a big part of the offense. As you were talking about earlier, he is emerging as one of the better pass-catching tight ends in the league, and he has a lot of opportunity and a lot of targets out there, especially if Marvin Harrison Jr. is not able to go. He is going to be thrust into that spotlight, and it's going to be up to him to perform and go out there and make the most of those opportunities. For me, it's punish the Cardinals on the ground. You have to take advantage of that weakness. The Cardinals are giving up the 4th most rushing yards per game allowed, with 153 yards per game on average. The Chargers have averaged 120 plus rushing yards in the 3 games that they have won, and less than 70 in their 2 losses. So their ability to run the football effectively, it directly coincides with their ability to win football games. So last week, the game plan was throw the ball more. And I mean, it's a lot easier to do that when Patrick Surtain II goes out with an injury. But they saw some opportunities to be able to do that. And so if they're able to establish the line of scrimmage and run the ball effectively, that's going to set up that play action. And that's where Justin Herbert is going to be able to go to work in the passing game.
I'm sitting Saquon Barkley and starting J.K. Dobbins this week. Let's just put it that way. I mean, especially with Gus Edwards still out.
Yeah,
right?
He's on IR.
Oh, yes. And then you have Kamani Vidal, I believe his name is, who's the backup who scored a touchdown last week.
On a wheel route. Real nice play.
That's it. I mean, and the thing with that, and I'll put the icing on the cherry on top here, is the Cardinals have been terrible at time of possession. And that's something, the best way to keep Kyler Murray off the field is just run the hell out of the ball with, efficiently. So for the Cardinals, for the final one for me, and it's got to be on the defensive side of the ball, being opportunistic when Justin Herbert does throw the ball, take chances. It doesn't matter if they're big at this point. Like, the pass rush isn't there. Justin Herbert has been, surgical at times. He's also thrown some really bad balls that have been intercepted. So I think all of that culminating into one path to victory for the defensive side of the ball for the Cardinals is keep things in front of you, bend, don't break. And they did that really well against the 49ers between the 20s. Obviously, you're not playing soft. You're not giving up yardage, but it's a bend, don't break thing, especially with the state of their defense at this point. If they can turn Justin Herbert over once may be good enough to stay in this game, twice, definitely. I mean, we saw them turn the ball over 3 times with the 49ers. But this could get ugly very quickly as well. And I think that the Cardinals gave away the last matchup with the Chargers. They were up, I believe, 2 scores, and then the Chargers just came back in the 4th quarter and took care of business, got a dub at State Farm Stadium. The Cardinals need to win or get close to winning the time of possession battle is my last one. They just have to, or this is going to be more of a bloodbath than people think on paper.
Yeah, no question. I feel like this is a team with the Arizona Cardinals that does not want to play from behind. Like, they absolutely do not want to play from behind. And I mean, obviously that's easy to say. No team wants to play from behind, but I don't know if they have the firepower to be able to throw themselves back into the game if they do get majorly behind. And the one thing the Chargers did fantastically last week was dominate that time of possession against the Broncos. 37 minutes to almost 23 minutes of time of possession. They kept their opponent off the field, opposing offense on the field, and their defense as fresh as they possibly could. And speaking of that defense, it's the number 1 defense by points per game allowed in the NFL. So Jesse Minter it deserves all his flowers, all the credit in the world from turning around a defense that for the last 3.5 years were probably bottom 5 in the league to now being the number 1 defense in the NFL is pretty special. So we'll see what happens. We'll see which team of these 2 teams are going to be able to run the ball. I think that's going to be critical to the performance of each of these football teams and who's able to capitalize on a mistake on defense. And like you said, we know turnovers, when they are created, they are complete momentum shifters, and they could be the difference in a win and a loss.
David Drogemeyer, Locked On Chargers, at Dro Talk SD on Twitter, at Clancy's Corner for me, Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. It's been fun, dude. It's good seeing you, buddy. We'll talk to you on our respective podcasts tomorrow.